He raised her kids, paid their bills, and stood by their mother for 25 years, only to be left with nothing at the will reading. But what her children didn't know was that the real inheritance hadn't even been read yet. As mourners gathered for the reading of Marsha's will, Raymond sat quietly in the back, never expecting the truth to shatter decades of loyalty in a single sentence. The room was still, save for the subtle hum of the ceiling fan and the soft shuffle of papers. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, casting a golden hue across the polished oak furniture of the downtown law office. Leather-bound law books lined the walls like silent witnesses. A silver tray of untouched coffee and shortbread cookies sat forgotten near the reception desk. Raymond sat slightly apart from the rest, his large hands folded in his lap, his dark suit crisp and pressed. His posture was dignified, but his eyes were tired, carrying the weight of a man who had given far more than he'd ever received. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone told a story the others refused to see. Across the room sat Marsha's 3 children, Vera, Lucas, and Colin, dressed in black but radiating impatience rather than grief. Their murmured whispers paused only when they cast sidelong glances toward Raymond. Cold, calculated, as if he were a stranger, not the man who had helped raise them. They'd never called him Dad. Not even once. Vera, the oldest, tapped her manicured nails against her phone screen, scrolling idly as the lawyer shuffled through papers. Lucas kept checking his watch, while Colin leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. They didn't acknowledge Raymond. They never really had. But Raymond remembered everything. He remembered driving Vera across state lines to college because she was too anxious to fly. He remembered co-signing Lucas's first car loan and paying it off quietly when Lucas couldn't. He remembered mortgaging his own house to fund Colin's doomed cafe venture that went belly up within a year. Through it all, he stood by Marsha, never once questioning her love or her loyalty. But even love, Raymond had learned, could come with caveats. Marsha had been his wife for 25 years. 25 years of steady companionship, shared holidays, quiet nights watching documentaries, and long talks about life, about legacy. She'd told him more than once that she considered him her rock. And yet, in this moment, seated in a room full of legal documents and silent judgments, Raymond felt like driftwood, untethered and adrift. He looked down at the simple gold wedding band on his finger. It had never left his hand since the day they exchanged vows in that quiet courthouse ceremony, where only Marsha's best friend had shown up to witness. Her children had refused to attend. He remembered Marsha's trembling voice that day. How she'd apologized again and again for their absence. "It doesn't matter," Raymond had said, smiling. "What matters is us." And for a long time, that had been enough. But now, surrounded by the sharp scent of cologne and the rustle of expensive clothing, Raymond couldn't shake the cold that settled in his chest. He wasn't naive. He knew he was never truly accepted by her children. They tolerated him, barely. They nodded when necessary, smiled when it served them. But behind their eyes, he always saw it. The resentment, the skepticism, the discomfort of privilege when confronted by presence. He didn't come from money. He didn't have the pedigree or the country club connections. What he had was loyalty, hard-earned wisdom, and love. Pure, unshakable love for Marsha. So he sat in silence, letting the echoes of her memory wash over him as the lawyer finally cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we are here today to honor the last will and testament of Marsha Grace Langley." Raymond's chest tightened at the sound of her full name. She'd always insisted he call her Mars. It was their private thing. Sweet, simple, theirs. He glanced once more at her children. Vera now had her arms crossed, already bored. Colin looked like he was calculating the worth of every asset he expected to receive. Lucas just seemed eager to be done with it all. Raymond took a slow breath. He hadn't come for money. He didn't need validation. He came for closure. But deep inside him, buried beneath years of patience and restraint, something whispered a warning. That this day, this quiet sunlit afternoon, would reveal more than he was prepared to hear, and in just a few moments, it would. The attorney adjusted his glasses and began to read, his voice steady and formal, slicing through the heavy silence like a gavel. "To my beloved daughter Vera," he said, "I leave the lake house in upstate New York, along with all furnishings therein." Vera sat up straighter, lips curling into a satisfied smile. She didn't even try to hide it. Raymond watched her out of the corner of his eye, but kept his expression still. That house had been Marsha's favorite escape, but it had also been Raymond's project. He'd personally restored the wraparound porch, laid the stone path by the garden, even built the bookshelves in the study with his own hands. To my son Lucas, the lawyer continued, I leave my investment portfolio, valued at approximately $850,000, along with my personal stocks in Langley Holdings. Lucas let out a quiet exhale of relief, mouthing a silent yes. Raymond remembered those stocks, how Marsha had once said she'd never sell them unless they were desperate. Apparently, not desperate enough to share them with the man who'd helped her weather 2 recessions, the attorney went on. To Colin, I leave the heirloom jewelry passed down from my grandmother, including the sapphire ring and the emerald brooch, as well as the vintage Cadillac, which Raymond so graciously kept in working condition. Raymond blinked. He remembered countless Saturdays spent under that car, elbow deep in grease. He'd restored it not because Colin appreciated it. Colin hadn't even known how to start it, but because Marsha had asked him to keep it alive. For the legacy. Now it would sit in Colin's garage, likely untouched, like a forgotten trophy. Raymond's heart beat slower with each line. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shift in his chair. But inside, a quiet ache began to form. Not because he wanted any of it, but because he suddenly wondered if he had ever truly belonged in this family at all. The lawyer shuffled more papers. To my second cousin Catherine, I leave the antique china set, as she always admired it during holidays. Raymond almost smiled. Catherine had only shown up once in the past decade, arriving late and leaving early. But even she, it seemed, had earned a mention. He waited for his name, waited for a word, a gesture, something to acknowledge the years. As the legal drone of property divisions filled the room, Raymond's mind began to wander, pulling him backward in time. It was almost 30 years ago. Marsha had hired him to renovate her kitchen. She'd been recently divorced, frazzled, sharp-tongued, but still warm beneath the surface. He remembered the way she'd stood in the middle, the old linoleum floor, barefoot arms crossed, pointing at every cabinet she wanted gone. "You're the contractor, right?" she had asked. Raymond had nodded, holding back a smile. "Only if you don't scare easy." She hadn't laughed then, but she did later, 3 weeks into the job, over a shared sandwich and stories of broken families. She told him she didn't trust anyone anymore. He didn't ask her to. Love didn't arrive all at once. It came in slow, soft waves. A cup of coffee left out for him in the mornings. A folded blanket left on the porch swing after long days. And finally, the trembling invitation to dinner, just dinner. But everything changed after that. Her kids had hated it. They called him the handyman when they spoke about him. Sometimes, even to his face. Marsha defended him at first. But over time, she softened the edges to keep the peace. "They just need time," she had said once, resting her head on his chest. "They're not used to someone like you." Raymond had swallowed that sentence whole, knowing exactly what it meant. Not just someone without a degree or someone not from money. It was everything. His skin, his story, his silence. Still, he stayed. He paid for Vera's private high school when her father bailed. He paid Lucas's first semester at Yale. And Collins's second attempt at starting a business after the first one failed. He took no credit, no pride. He did it because Marsha loved them and he loved her. Love, he believed, meant stepping up even when no one applauded. And now here he was, sitting among those who had never clapped for him once. The lawyer cleared his throat and looked around the room. "We are nearing the conclusion of Mrs. Langley's will. This is Langley's will. There are a few final statements before we close." Raymond sat up slightly, eyes forward. Perhaps now, surely now, he had waited long enough. The attorney's voice lowered slightly, as if sensing the weight of what came next. He straightened the final page and glanced briefly around the room before reading the last line aloud. "To my loving husband Raymond, I leave my gratitude." For a moment, the room fell utterly silent. Then came the gasps, quiet, sharp, almost synchronized. The kind of collective disbelief that cuts through air like a sudden gust of wind. Even the sound of the air conditioning seemed to fade as all eyes turned toward Raymond. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply sat there, frozen, his spine rigid, his fingers twitching slightly on the armrest of the chair. My gratitude. 2 words. That was it. After 25 years of marriage, a lifetime of sacrifices and building a family that was never truly his, all Marcia had left him was a sentiment. A breath on paper. Nothing more. The attorney, unsure how to proceed, looked up, his lips parting slightly. But the damage had already been done. Raymond blinked once, twice. He stared at the papers in the lawyer's hand as if willing the words to change. But they remained the same, indifferent and unmoved. Marcia was gone, and this was her final word. No house, no account, no acknowledgement, nothing. Across the room, Colin leaned back in his chair with a smug expression, crossing his arms like a king surveying conquered land. Vera raised her eyebrows in mock surprise and exchanged a look with Lucas, who let out a quiet snort. Then came the whisper, low, cruel, and cutting. Guess he finally sees his place. Raymond heard it. Of course he did. Every word landed, like a nail into his chest. But he said nothing. He stood slowly, adjusting his coat as if bracing for cold that had nothing to do with the weather. His face was unreadable, but his eyes shimmered with the kind of pain that comes from deep, quiet betrayal. The kind you never see coming because you trusted too much. He nodded once to the lawyer, not out of respect, but simply because he still believed in dignity, even when dignity wasn't returned. Then he turned and walked out. The sound of his footsteps echoed against the marble floor, each one slower than the last. He didn't glance back. He didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him broken. But just before he reached the door, his hand lifted slightly to his face. He wiped the corner of his eye. Once. Then kept walking. Outside, the sun still hung in the sky, but it no longer felt warm. The city carried on as usual, cars honking, pedestrians rushing by, a delivery man yelling into his phone. Life moved forward, unaware of the heartbreak taking place just beyond the office door. Raymond walked to the edge of the sidewalk and stopped. The traffic light turned green, but he didn't cross. He stood still, staring at nothing. His reflection in the nearby glass showed a man who had given everything and received nothing in return. He thought about the early mornings when he made Marcia coffee before she woke up. The way she used to laugh when he fixed the broken heater in the dead of winter without asking. The anniversaries he never missed. The times he defended her kids, even when they disrespected him. He'd done all of it with love, not for recognition, not for reward. But this silence from beyond the grave, this erasure of everything he had been to her. It cut deeper than he expected. His shoulders sagged. A pedestrian brushed past him, muttering an apology. Raymond barely noticed. All he could think was, why? Why had she left him with nothing? Had he misread everything? Was her love just words? Was her silence around her children's disdain a form of quiet agreement? Had he simply been convenient? He wanted to scream. But Raymond didn't believe in rage. Not out loud. He'd been taught all his life that the world already expected his anger. He refused to give them more fuel. So instead, he walked. Down. The block. Past the bank where he and Marcia used to deposit their joint checks. Past the flower shop where he bought her tulips every spring. And into the long afternoon, where questions pressed heavy against his chest, but answers remained cruelly out of reach. 3 days had passed. Raymond hadn't returned a single call. He hadn't stepped back into the house he once shared with Marcia, now technically Vera's, according to the will. He'd spent the last 72 hours in a small rented apartment across town, surrounded by moving boxes he didn't yet have the strength to unpack. He hadn't cried, not because he didn't want to, but because the pain sat in a place too deep for tears. It lived beneath the bones where only silence could reach. Then on the fourth morning, something unexpected arrived. A knock at the door, light, almost hesitant. When Raymond opened it, no one stood there, just a courier envelope resting on the welcome mat. His name was handwritten on the front in a script he recognized instantly. Marcia's. His breath caught. The paper was slightly aged, the ink slightly smudged, as if it had been written in a hurry or through tears. He closed the door softly, sat on the edge of the unmade bed, and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, one folded letter and a smaller sealed envelope marked, "For the attorney." Only after Raymond reads this, he unfolded the letter, and with each line the air seemed to thicken. "My dearest Raymond, if you're reading this, I'm already gone, and I fear I've broken your heart in the process. Please, before you judge me too harshly, let me explain. I wanted to leave you everything. You deserved it all and more. But my children, they came to me months ago with threats. They said if I left you a single cent, They'd contest the will, drag your name through the courts and paint you as a manipulator. They said horrible things. Things I knew weren't true, but the more I pushed back, the more vicious they became. And Raymond, I was scared. Not for myself, but for the peace you so deeply deserve. I didn't want you to spend your golden years battling vultures. So I made a choice. I created two versions of my legacy. The one they heard, the public will, was a decoy. I wanted to see who they would become when they thought they had it. Oh, I wanted you to see it too. The real will, the real plan, is enclosed in the second envelope. Inside you'll find the access details to the trust one created solely in your name. It contains the house, the stocks, the properties, the art collection, the account, everything. You never asked for anything from me. But I've spent 25 years quietly building a life for you in return for the one you gave me. You saved me, Raymond. You gave me something no inheritance ever could. Dignity, safety, unconditional love. Please forgive me for the performance I had to leave behind. I only wanted the truth to reveal itself in time. And now, it has. Forever yours, Marcia. Raymond stared at the page, the words swimming before his eyes. He read the letter again, and again. Each time the sharp ache in his chest softened, replaced by something else. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since the day in that law office. Relief. Not for the money. Not for the properties. But because Marcia had seen him. Truly seen him. She hadn't betrayed him. She had protected him in her own quiet, brilliant way. He looked down at the second envelope and opened it with careful hands. Inside were printed documents, notarized and signed. Bank account. Numbers, deed transfers. A legal trust in his name. And tucked into the final page, a mission statement. Marcia had created a foundation in his name. One designed to fund mentorships and scholarships for stepfathers and guardians of blended families. Men like Raymond, who often gave everything and received nothing in return. It wasn't just a gift. It was a legacy. Raymond closed his eyes, clutching the letter to his chest. For the first time in days he let himself cry. Not out of sorrow, but out of gratitude. Out of vindication. Out of love. Because sometimes justice doesn't shout. It whispers in letters left behind. In actions buried beneath layers of silence. In a truth that finally rises when everything else has fallen away. And in that moment, Raymond knew. Marcia had never left him out. She had simply saved the best for last. Raymond didn't return to the law office. He didn't call Marcia's children. He didn't storm into what was once his home demanding recognition or vengeance or apology. Instead, he took a deep breath, folded Helen's final letter, and began again. Not for himself, but for the people like him. The ones who loved quietly, who gave everything without ever asking for credit. The invisible fathers, the second husbands, the quiet protectors. Within weeks, he activated the foundation Marcia had created in his name, the Raymond Trust. Its mission was clear: scholarships for underrepresented stepfathers and guardians. Men who often filled the gap in broken families but were written out of their stories. Applications poured in. Men from all walks of life, construction workers, teachers, bus drivers, finally saw themselves valued. Raymond met them, shook their hands, listened to their stories. And for the first time, he no longer felt alone in the role he had carried. For decades, he still lived in the same house. The one Marcia had left to him quietly, legally. The same house her children once assumed was theirs to claim. They returned one afternoon, weeks later, smug and entitled, with printed paperwork and threats of eviction. Vera even arrived with a realtor, ready to list the home without so much as a knock. But when they opened the gate, they found Raymond already seated on the porch, sipping tea, a file of documents neatly waiting beside him. "I'd ask you to sit," he said gently, "but something tells me this won't take long." They scoffed, laughed, called him delusional, until he handed them the papers. The trust documents, the deeds, Marcia's signature, the notarized filings. They read in silence. The color drained from Vera's face. Colin stared at the foundation brochure with his name nowhere in sight. Lucas paced like a man who just bet the house and lost. Raymond didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply stood and looked each of them in the eye. "You can inherit money," he said calmly, "but character, that's earned." "No," one responded. There was nothing left to say. They left without another word. Later that night, Raymond walked through the hallway lined with memories, photos of vacations, birthdays, quiet dinners. Some had faces he no longer saw as family. But others, like the one of him and Marcia standing arm in arm on the porch, still brought warmth. He placed her letter in a frame on the mantel, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That love, real love, isn't. If you enjoy this story, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, who knows what story we will uncover next.